is my first time using my, whoops, maybe go this way. Sorry about that. Oh, it says its orientation is locked, so I got to stay this way. So, happy Easter, and this is the first time I've made a video in quite some time, and in hilarious Easter fashion, why don't I just review a book I just finished yesterday, Schopenhauer as Educator by Friedrich Nietzsche. This book is one of his earlier productions. It's not that long. You see, it's about 100 or so short pages, small book, smaller size print, 100 and whatever pages, 10 pages maybe. And it's, as I said, it's one of his earlier works. And basically, Schopenhauer as Educator should actually be accurately titled Schopenhauer as Nietzsche's Educator, Nietzsche's inspiration in his early age, in his youth, let's say. So it's not necessarily a book on Schopenhauer as much as a book on what Schopenhauer has meant to Nietzsche, philosophically speaking. So just sort of as a quick overview, I guess it was a part of a larger theory, a larger work called something like Timely Thoughts or Untimely Thoughts or something like that. And he had, and this is the biggest chunk. Schopenhauer's Educator is the biggest of the 3 or 4 parts or whatever. I think he dedicated another part to Albert Schweitzer. If you know who Albert Schweitzer is, he was a German, German theologian, scripture scholar. And I don't think his review of Schweitzer is all that positive or whatever, but I'm going to read that one eventually. And there's another part. Anyway, but as I said, there's half of those untimely essays or whatever they're called, is Schopenhauer's Educator. Now, if you know anything about if you know anything about Nietzsche, you'd know that he is, you'd see most of his primary thoughts already in this early work. And basically, Nietzsche, I suppose, in a nutshell, was all about realizing your inner potential. And he saw philosophy basically as a practical thing. So all the mottos and so on that are associated with him, like God is dead, the will to power, all that stuff. I mean, those are useful, but they're not really all that informative. And in fact, one of the interesting things I have found with Nietzsche is his admiration for Christianity, even though he was an atheist and he wrote a book called The Antichrist. I suppose, he always talks about Christianity as basically as sort of capturing some aspects of his own doctrine, but he basically describes Christianity in a positive light as that thing which makes saints, and everything else, he has no regard for anything else after that. And the things like his most famous work, I suppose, is Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and where he, for instance, a saint is featured as one of the characters or meta characters in Thus Spake. Anyway, so in this Schopenhauer's Educator, it's really a really interesting and stimulating discussion of some of Nietzsche's ideas about education and about philosophy. He gets a little long-winded at times, but he's one of the most succinct and interesting writers ever read. I always call him Candy. He's literally candy because he's so enjoyable, like he's so fun to read. But that's not to say his thoughts are not nutritious or whatever. In fact, he's very mentally stimulating. So I think that what you're going see is this There's definitely, you know what? There's so many of the same themes in every one of his works that, frankly, I think you could start with any of them. My favorites have been Antichrist and Twilight of Idols. His Ichi Homo. Don't read Ichi Homo until I guess you've read other works, because it's kind of a review of his other works. So, but I mean, even still, you could start with Ichi Homo. Suspect Zarathustra is the most probably abstract one. He has in general, Nietzsche has a very aphoristic style, and that's it's just so interesting to read and so fun to read. He's aphoristic, he's provocative. So in a nutshell, he looks at Schopenhauer, and he was fascinated with Schopenhauer in his youth, I guess, kind of like I was with Tolstoy or whatever, and then later on with Augustine, I guess. But Schopenhauer sort of encouraged him to formulate his central theses, and really drew inspiration from Schopenhauer. And then, of course, Nietzsche went through a very long Wagner stage. And Wagner, I don't respect Wagner that much, the famous anti-Semite and all that, but nevertheless, Nietzsche found good things in all of them, and indeed, I wouldn't say he outgrew Schopenhauer, but he certainly outgrew Wagner in time. Hi, Maria Prisciliano and Sylvester to something. Thanks for being an example of diabetes. Okay. That's funny, actually. I don't know how to respond because it's the first time doing live on my cell phone, but I'm not ignoring you, Trina and Maria and Sylvester. You're welcome for being an example of diabetes. Actually, I had some chocolate today. So anyway, so he looks at Schopenhauer as someone who, I guess, is on the right side of the divide between, say, abstraction and impracticality on the one hand, and he talks very critically, I think the second last of the chapters in this book, of university philosophy, university philosophy. He also calls it state-run philosophy or whatever. And it's not; those ideas. There are nothing that you wouldn't find sympathy with. Certainly, again, reading a lot of Tolstoy recently, he certainly shares the same thoughts about university philosophy. I suppose you could call the acceptable philosophy, the philosophy that doesn't really challenge, that doesn't really make for greatness. So I think, like, for me, for instance, fighting off diabetes as I am, JK is fine, fighting off diabetes as I am, Nietzsche's all about, I guess, in that sense, actualizing all your power, all your potential, all your power. And again, I think this is some, you say, oh, Nietzsche inspired Hitler or whatever. No, he didn't. Well, I mean, there's as much in Nietzsche that Hitler would hate as he would like. Okay, so I guess you could say the gospel inspired Hitler then, or the Quran inspired Hitler, or the dictionary inspired Hitler. The whole will to power thing was something that Hitler stole from Nietzsche, but it's like a word, right? Or phrase. But anyway, so I'm not an expert on Schopenhauer. I've read a little bit of Schopenhauer. I really love his briefer essays, but I've not read his main works. His world as will as representation, or world as will and representation or something. But I think that I can get the gist of Schopenhauer. So that's Nietzsche in a nutshell, and that's what he looks to Schopenhauer for is Schopenhauer is all about the will and so on. And in a certain sense, I mean, existentialism, and people say Nietzsche founded existentialism. Some people say it was Dostoevsky. Some people say it was Kierkegaard. But whatever the case, one of those things, one of those essential features of existentialism is making yourself. So choosing to be what you are rather than having received in the old Aristotelian, Platonic, and Christian sense, having received a nature from God, you make your own nature. And I think that that's one aspect that Nietzsche really hammers home on. But I find this work most interesting because of how he, like for me personally, how he makes you want to take personal responsibility and push yourself and be okay with being different and being not what other people want you to be. I know, yeah, that sounds very trite. Like it sounds like something you'd see in, somebody post on Facebook or something like that. But he means it in a very, I could almost say it in a dangerous sense, right? Is just some beautiful phrases he has in there where he talks about becoming unpleasant, that your transition from being what you thought you were supposed to be to becoming what you should be in your pursuit of truth and beauty. And he holds out, as I said, the saint, he holds out the artist, he holds out the genius, he holds out Schopenhauer, he holds out Goethe and Beethoven. He says Beethoven's the best of all people. So in all that, it's challenging to, even to like a middle-aged, sort of worn out person like me, to say, I guess don't be afraid to be different. I mean, that sounds so very trite, but again, it's cool. So if you want a quick read of Nietzsche, Schopenhauer's Educator isn't his most popular book, but I found it very inspirational. And if you have any thoughts about education and so on, certainly be worth your time. Anyway, as I said again, happy Easter, and hopefully this cell phone thing worked. I don't know if it will or not, but we'll see. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Prisciliano, Marcellus, Decat. Love all of you, and I'll talk to you later.